But honestly, hearing the inflated claims of the ruling party after this weak budget and all the TV shows I had to appear on yesterday, I am reminded of a garage mechanic saying to the owner of a car, "हम आपके brakes तो ठीक नहीं कर सके, इसलिए horn की आवाज़ को बढ़ा दिया." That's what the Sarkar is doing. The brakes of the Indian economy have fallen out, but this government's horn keeps getting louder. Let's look at the targets announced for Make in India in its 10 years of existence and underachievement. This government thinks honestly that rhetoric is a substitute for action. But if I may move to another sector of the economy which the budget barely pays any attention to, that's education, immensely critical to employment generation. For all the BJP's talk of upskilling youth and equipping them with the tools they need to procure jobs in today's intensely competitive job market, there was no mention in the budget speech of primary or higher education. We have a staggering 3.5 million youngsters, 35 lakhs, dropped out of school in the last academic year for which there are records. And this is not just an indication of economic failure by the government, kids having to join the informal workforce to support their families, but it's the future of India stepping away from the path of knowledge, Mr. Chairman. It's deeply unfortunate, and while leaving school may not be in these students' hands, getting them back to school is certainly in the government's hands. So it's a shame that access to quality and compulsory education has been wholly overlooked in this budget. Education has been allocated a miserly 1.2 lakh crore rupees, which is a 7% decrease from the revised estimated allocation of 23-24. More alarming is the fact that the allocation for the Department of School Education and Literacy as a share of the total budget outlay reduced from 3.16% in 2013-14, the last year that we were in government, when the UPA was there, to just 1.53% in 24-25. And the combined allocations for both the departments have declined from 4.7% as a share of the total budget expenditure in our last year to 2.53% in your so far last year. Now, as a share of GDP, it's even worse. It's a horrifically low 0.36%. The government's own new education policy of 2020 recommends that the education budget should be 6% of GDP. Now, Mr. Chairman, if this Modi government cannot even meet the goals that they set for themselves, then what can we expect of them, Mr. Chairman? In continuance of their onslaught in education, by the way, the budget has slashed the funding for the UGC by 60%. Sir, my party has allocated 20 minutes to me, sir. So I have another 6 or 7 to go.
You are having 15 members.
No, sir, I've been told 20, and I've prepared accordingly, please. But they've slashed the UGC budget by 60%, and fears do abound now that this will reduce the UGC to purely a regulatory agency, encourage universities to start more self-financing courses, creating an additional financial burden on students, and will also make more universities dependent on loans from the Higher Education Financing Agency, a complete transformation in our education environment. On top of that, in 2019, the government introduced a 4% education and health cess, which is not a sustainable source of revenue for the government, but this cess has financed 70% of total educational expenditure after 2015. So that is another source of worry. So there's little to cheer on health and education, but should we welcome the government's belated recognition of the worst ever employment crisis in our country in history by their borrowing the Congress Party's proposed apprenticeship scheme and renaming it? No. First, because the exaggerated claims of the government that it added 125 million jobs in its 10 years, including 47 million last year, are completely fake. They include unpaid labor, and even 1 hour's work a week has been counted as a job. Second, because they've diluted our scheme. We had proposed an apprenticeship which would lead to jobs. They've reduced that to an internship, which is only assistance. They've only restricted to 500 top companies. We had it open-ended. We offered 1 lakh per person. They're offering only 5,000 rupees a month. And on top of that, they're saying 10% from CSR funds. CSR funds are meant for social welfare benefits and not for the companies to spend on themselves. So I have to say, on top of that, you have the fine print in the annexure that says that the participation in these companies is voluntary. I don't know how they're going to define the 500 top companies, and how would these companies voluntarily shoulder the government's burden of creating an economy where there are enough jobs. The precedents are not encouraging. Can the government tell us what became of their 10 years of skill development efforts? How many of those trained have been placed in real jobs? What about the schemes for women? Why is female labor force participation at a record low today of 28%? मगर चलिए सभापति जी, बहुमत हारने के बाद बीजेपी तो हमारे सुझाव मानने लगी, ये तो अच्छी बात है अगर इससे भारत की भलाई हो जाएगी. But it's amusing to me that the BJP had to lose its majority in parliament before they became receptive to effective suggestions from the opposition. Let me immodestly point out that it was I who in the Lok Sabha on 10th of March 2016 asked the late Finance Minister Shri Arun Jaitley to reduce or remove angel tax in order to strengthen the startup ecosystem. And I'm glad to see that 8 years later, a finance minister has heeded my words and abolished it. So, chalo der aaye, durust aaye. But I have to say that the finance minister's rosy claims on FDI are belied by facts. FDI as a ratio of GDP has in fact collapsed from an average 2% of GDP to 0.5% of GDP last year, the lowest in a decade. One big reason for stunted private investment is the heightened risk perception of the Indian economy. Foreign companies actually pulling money out of our country. Some $44.4 billion have been pulled out in 23-24. And actual FDI, that is investments minus what they take out, has fallen to 26 billion, which is a 37% drop, according to RBI data, and the lowest number since 2006-07, when the UPA was in power. Similarly, the government's disservice of removing indexation benefits under the long-term capital gains tax is unforgivable, because countless members of the middle class worked tirelessly for years to be able to afford a house or make an investment in real estate to secure a pakka house for their families, and it's no longer a viable investment because you no longer can index the appreciation of that value to inflation, and you will pay a much larger sum as a result. In this example, a couple of minutes more, sir. In this example, we are looking at the government taking more taxes out of the pockets of the middle class, out of people who might even end up losing money in the course of buying and selling a property, which may be the only one that they can afford. So the real worry with all of this is that you're going to see a strong resurgence of cash transactions in purchases of property. It'll bring the real estate economy back into the deadly fold of black money. So much for na khaunga, na khane dunga. I must say, sir, the government keeps boasting of capex and infrastructure, but the fact is that, and it even says it'll create jobs in the tourism sector because of this. But the truth is, how can you create jobs or strengthen tourism when your refusal to reduce GST in hotels has made India amongst the costliest destinations?
You exhausted 20 minutes already, please.
Or indeed boost tourism when everything in the infrastructure we're seeing is collapsing. Terminal 1 in Delhi, the roof has collapsed. Rajkot and Jabalpur, the canopies have collapsed. 5 bridges have fallen in Bihar last month. And Mumbai's Trans-Harbour Link, which was inaugurated by the PM in January of this year, has developed cracks. So what the finance minister ought to do is allocate resources to fix our infrastructure rather than boasting about the tourists it will attract. I'm going to wrap up, sir, with just one sad comment further before I conclude, which is the accidents and the failure of the government to implement its own kavach that it's been talking about. We've had grisly and ghastly railway accidents, but the kavach system has only utilized less than half of the money allotted to it in the last budget, and only 1% of the total amount of railway lines that are supposed to have been equipped with kavach have been equipped. So this is pretty shameful, and the budget has glossed over it. Nor did the finance minister mention Manrega, which has been mentioned by others, so I can just say in one sentence that demand keeps going up, but the Modi government keeps reducing its allocations to this. And it's the allocation they've requested now is far short of the amounts requested and required to meet the demands. On top of that, they've deleted job cards. 267% of more job cards have been deleted this year, and the new Aadhaar-based payment system has left 8 million active workers ineligible for payment. This is supposed to be something to help the rural poor. It's actually hurting them, sir. Let me conclude by saying that this budget is a do-nothing, claim-to-do-everything exercise. No matter how much the government ratchets up the mythic vision of a Viksit Bharat and its rhetoric, this is not a budget for a Viksit Bharat. It's a motley collection of schemes without an analytical framework or a coherent spending plan, and no pathway to achieve the boasts and rhetoric of either Amrit Kal or Viksit Bharat. The government is selling us a penthouse in a building whose foundations are shaky, whose canopy has collapsed, whose lift shaft is yet to be installed, and whose workers are starving. The budget lacks originality, ambition, strategy. We get no answers to the employment puzzle. We get no solutions to education and health. And we don't engage with any of the crises of investment I've outlined today. The budget that India needs and India deserves is much more than a statement of solidarity with the ruling party's political allies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.